Hello, everybody. Welcome to the major MLB Trade History podcast with one of your co-hosts, Amir and
Scott Talbert.
welcome, guys. We're really excited and kind of saddened that the World Series and the baseball season has ended, but we're really excited to do this podcast and bring this to you guys. Essentially, what our podcast today is about. The trades done by the two World Series teams, San Francisco Giants and the Kansas City Royals. And it was a really exciting World Series. There's so many people involved. But, since we're a trade podcast mainly, we want to talk about some of the essential trades that each of the teams did. So we can just go on and first talk about the World Series. Scott, what did you think about it? What are some thoughts that you had?
It's one of the greatest World Series I've seen because my team won it all.
Yeah.
But beyond that, before the series began, there was a lot of negative press about this being... It hadn't even started yet, and people were saying this is the worst World Series ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that because both teams had fewer than 90 wins each, and they were both wild card teams, and the Giants who ended up winning were the 10th, seed if you ranked all the playoff teams in both leagues. And as far as pure World Series, I think it was wonderful because you love the 7 games and the back and forthness. Like the Giants won the first game, the Royals won 2 and 3, the Giants won 4 and 5, and Royals won 6, and then the Giants won the 7th and final to become get their 3rd championship in 5 years. And, no one expected the Giants to be there, let alone win it all. But fewer thought that of the Royals, I think. I know people in the Missouri area and in the Midwest, they knew the Royals were good last year. And had up-and-coming players that we'll get into. The Giants were injured. And, they had guys just kind of not contributing as much. With big contracts, by the way. And, the Dodgers have all the money and the publicity and the sports networks back east. And it was unexpected for both teams. So, and 7 games and the way it finished, and I'm blown away by Madison Bumgarner's 5 innings of shutout relief. That just doesn't happen. So, not in today's baseball, it doesn't. So, wonderful series.
Yeah, it's, I myself, I have been a San Francisco Giants fan too since I could, speak English, since I even found out about baseball. And back then, when I started to get into the Giants, they weren't good. Right. And now, obviously, a lot of people are calling them a dynasty. Yep. So, it was a great series for me. It was probably my favorite World Series. Actually, it's my second favorite. As a baseball fan, my favorite World Series is the one with Twins versus Atlanta Braves, where Jack Morris and John Smoltz went, head-to-head, and that was a great...
10 innings.
Yeah. 1-0, I believe.
1-0. Lonnie Smith base running mistake, and
And this was, this 7th game was just as exciting, obviously to me, because I had so much invested.
Yeah.
But it's really just, even thinking about the players, to your point, Scott, there are so many people who didn't live up to their contract on the Giants, so many injured, so many key players injured, that they've gotten in trades.
Yeah.
Scudero, who they got in a trade back in 2010, wasn't even existent. Pagan, they got a trade maybe the year before that.
The same season? Oh, yeah, in the off season before that.
Yeah, who contributed to that World Series, was not on there. Matt Cain, who was a homegrown guy, they're arguably before the season their maybe number 1 pitcher wasn't there. So there's a lot of, and then
Tim Lincecum didn't contribute. He hardly played in the playoffs. He was kind of the Barry Zito of this year, except he was actually on the roster, so he wasn't that bad. But
and the Royals, a combination of great. In-house talent, and they actually made some amazing trades, which we're excited to really talk about.
Yeah. By the way, one other kind of off-the-radar or under-the-radar injury was, the Giants have talked about for a lot of the season to have a horrible bench, which was true. They did. And they lost, Hector Sanchez, their second-string catcher, who a lot of people wanted in trades. Brian Sabian talks about free scouting. Free scouting, for our audience, if you don't know, is when other teams inquire about certain guys on your team that the experts on the web, on the World Wide Web, don't really talk about. And we're going to get into one of the trades the Giants made a couple years ago, where they gave up a catcher, but what the Phillies wanted was in part Hector Sanchez. But we could talk more about that soon. Oh, and by the way, there's a key pitcher from that Atlanta, Minnesota World Series that was on the last Royals World Series, Charlie Leibrandt.
Leibrandt, yes, right. Yeah, Charlie Leibrandt.
Yeah. So what do we want to do? Giants first or Royals first?
Let's talk about the Giants first.
Okay.
Get that out of the way. Get our bragging.
Yeah.
Nah, we don't want to brag. I know you guys can. Some of you guys out there might get annoyed if we talk about too much about the Giants. So let's get that out of the way, and then we'll talk about the Royals, which had some really interesting trades come up. I think the first thing that really comes up, just the one trade of the season, is Jake Peavy.
Yep.
The Giants getting Jake Peavy. We actually talked about this
We
at
did.
our end of the trading deadline and said how important this was.
Yeah.
Which it didn't help that much in the playoffs, but
helped them get to the playoffs. So
helped them get to the playoffs.
Yeah.
That was big.
Yeah.
But so they traded Edwin Escobar and Heath Hembry for Jake Peavy, and at the time, the first second I heard about it, I was all like, meh.
Yeah.
Giants aren't going anywhere. They're not going to go to the playoffs. But they need a starter just to fill in. Which is why initially I felt like this was not a good trade, because you heard about Heath Hembry being a future closer.
Right.
And Edwin Escobar the year before was one of the top prospects in the major leagues. This year he was not. He kind of dropped.
Right.
But as we found out, Hembry and Escobar were not that great.
Right.
They weren't even the best pitchers in the system that people knew about. Just kind of like the free scouting that you alluded to. There are a lot better pitchers that Giants had that people didn't even know about. And then Peavy started to win and do really well with them, and it became. He was the reason for a while. He was carrying the team even when. I think Bumgarner was pitching well, but he wasn't like at the stature he is now.
Right.
I mean, he's a great pitcher. He's an all-star, but there was a point where he wasn't getting wins. And
it was around that time where they made the trade for Peavy.
Yeah.
And Peavy, even through the playoffs, through the sixth game of the World Series, he was their number 2 starter.
Yeah.
And there's also intangibles too, I think. Like, people bring up the Bruce Bochy connection because they both were with San Diego before, and there's a lot of talk too, Amir, about how I think this is true with every team. They just knew something that the media didn't know about, just about Peavy. They probably dug a lot deeper into the statistics, and then the intangible of playing with Bruce Bochy, and there's talk locally about how there's so many like Southern players, from Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and maybe that can. Who knows? I mean, I'm kind of like, it just comes down to talent, really, or I haven't heard anyone say this, but there's the whole he's playing for a contract thing.
Yeah.
So who knows? But whatever it was, it got them to the playoffs. He filled a huge void, the number 2 position. Coming into the season, you mentioned Matt Cain was number 1. Even I think Bumgarner, he started opening day. I don't remember, but 1, 2, interchangeable.
He was spiritual number 1. Like the guy people look to, even if Bumgarner is a better pitcher.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's the longest tenured Giant too. And I don't know about this last season, but I know that he was the players rep for a long time. So I mean and I think you and I talked about in our trade deadline special that this idea that if you're kind of giving up what's perceived to be more talent and receiving what you receive in return is less than and criticize, but you win it all, I don't care. Who cares? And I think it's important too that Jake Peavy did contribute to them getting to the playoffs. It's like we talked about the John Lester trade, and the Samardzija trade for the A's. If they win it all, who cares about Cespedes, right? You know, who cares about who's the shortstop they give?
Addison Russell.
Addison Russell. It's like, who cares, you know? So it's like when Edgar Renteria hit that home run in 2010, I literally started sobbing. It felt like they're finally going to win.
Yeah.
That bad contract disappeared in my eyes, you know.
And then when Zito pitched those 2 great games.
Yeah.
Well, I still hate. No, I'm just kidding. no.
Actually, yeah.
I still was bothered by him. No, just kidding. No, but like it was worth it. Like he won them the World Series. He helped win them the World Series.
Yeah.
By pitching those 2 games, but yeah, I mean, I think you said it all. I think in terms of Jake Peavy, there's intangibles because whether they're from the South, you notice like the Giants. I do think that they're better than some of their. They're like. The sum of the talent is more than the individuals. I really believe that.
Right.
And part of it is the personalities, and the Giants really make sure they bring in the right personalities.
Right.
They bring the right, statistics people. They bring they even had like a sleep specialist.
Yeah.
But I do think that they bring in the right kind of people, and Jake Peavy is the right kind of person who really cares about winning. And I'm sure Bochy knew that he's a good teammate. He can help other people. So and then. People forget about this. And I think you alluded to this. Like, there's nothing more important than people feeling comfortable that there's a number 2 pitcher there. There's someone in place. Matt King goes down. You're like, who's going to replace him? A rookie? So even if he comes in and maybe doesn't do as well as he did, which he did amazing. There's still this confidence that there's this former Cy Young winner who's a veteran who's taken up a void, and we can all relax and play hard.
Yeah, mentally it helps you to kind of move forward, and maybe even like the pitchers 3, 4, and 5 in rotation to feel less stress because it's like, oh, I don't have to overperform and fill that void or move up in the chain. And by the way, even though he didn't really contribute, he was on a World Series winning team with the Red Sox last season too. So there's that part of it too.
And there's a lot of stuff that goes on in dugout where like maybe he'll see something, like he'll talk to Madison Bumgarner and say like, here's your arm is, you're showing too much or something like that. So I mean, there's a lot of these things that people don't talk about. And but at the same time, I mean, like the dude pitched great in the regular season. I'm actually gonna see if I can look up his stats. I don't have it at the top of my head. Excuse me.
I think his ERA was like under 3 with the Giants.
2.17.
Yeah, I mean that's excellent. Excellent.
And don't forget, if you bring up some rookie, because at the time they didn't think they were even going to get to the playoffs. Bring up some rookie. That's not going to save the bullpen for when you get to the playoffs. If you get to the playoffs, you have a fresh bullpen, which and this guy pitched really well, like amazing.
And poor run support, it didn't phase him, right? And so
that's a veteran,
Yeah.
So good trade.
Good trade.
The next one, this one's a little. The Giants made this trade in 2012. This one you alluded to. They traded Tommy Joseph, Seth Rosen, and Nate Scherholtz for this man, Hunter Pence.
Hunter Pence, the kind of he was kind of looked at as a spiritual leader. I mean, he's positive. He's healthy. He eats well. He works out. He's a positive guy. It's almost like he's had some kind of awakening recently or something. And I mean, the Phillies wanted, Rosen and Scherholtz and Hector Sanchez. Every other team back then wanted Hector Sanchez, and if I remember correctly, Nate Scherholtz broke his foot and hardly played for them, and then he went to the Cubs, and he was with the Nationals on their roster against the Giants. Tommy Joseph, I thought I heard he was out of baseball, but I don't remember. Do you know much about that?
I think I heard that he actually got a concussion. Unfortunately, due to the concussion, he might have to retire.
Right. Much like Hector Sanchez, by the way.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate.
Right. And then the other guy, he's the other guy that we can't remember. So
I can't even read.
Seth Rosen or something like that. Seth Rogen.
The comedian.
Al Rosen's son.
Seth Rosen, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's not doing very much, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a friend who's a Phillies fan, and and the Phillies gave up one of their biggest talents, who's on the Astros now, for 100 pence. He's all like, why do we give him up?
Yeah.
We got nothing for him.
Right.
Actually, Seth Rosen is with Texas now, so.
There you go.
He's not even pitching for the Phillies.
And, this isn't a trade or anything. Oh, by the way, Hunter Pence, if it wasn't for Mad Bum, he or Sandoval would have won the MVP of the World Series.
Yeah.
And Hunter Pence, he was going to become a free agent after the end of that season. And this isn't a trade, but the contract the Giants got for him right now, at this moment, is looking really sweet. Compared to like what the Yankees gave Jacoby Ellsbury and some of the other outfielders that are going around, Pence got like what, 90 something, about 90 million or something. Yeah. So, yeah, in real life that's a lot of money, but in baseball life it is really not that much.
Bargain.
Yeah.
And he had a great year this year. I mean, he was an all-star this year.
Yep.
Potential, he'll probably get like MVP votes. You know.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about Pence is like he's a hot, streaky hitter, right? Like he'll get hot and cold.
Yeah.
And when he came with the Giants, when they traded for him, he got a lot of RBIs, but he couldn't hit well. He didn't really contribute offensively, and even in the playoffs, he didn't hit very well in 2012. He's more like the guy, the raw guy.
Yeah.
He plays really good defense, but this year in the playoffs, oh my God, you look at like he batted over 400 in the World Series. He batted over 300 throughout the playoffs, so he actually really contributed. To me, this was his best year for the Giants, and I feel like as a pro, because I mean he won a World Series and he played really well in the playoffs.
Right.
I think he was top of the league in one of the run scores. I don't know if he led, but
he was up there. He had triple digits or almost triple digits run scored, I think.
I mean, he's one of those guys that, like, his stats this year, I feel like don't tell the whole story. Even though he got really good stats.
Yeah.
He was like, he batted leadoff this year. He batted fifth, fourth, did he bat second? He just did everything Bochy told him and he delivered. So. Yeah.
He even threw three shutout, three complete game shutouts during the season, too, when Matt Cain went down. He did everything, and the guy likes kale. You can't hate a guy who likes kale. I know most people want to, but and he rides a little Razor scooter, right? So which got stolen, and the Bat Kid thing. He's just a great guy, And and I think it was his best season. Definitely as a Giant, maybe as a major leaguer.
I mean, he's had better stats anywhere else.
Yeah.
But he actually had 5 outfield assists too, which people don't really.
And he's a good base runner and base stealer, too. Yeah. And he could sneak a steal here if you really need it. And it's interesting you mentioned his defense in right field, because we just talked about two guys who may be the best defensive right fielders in AT&T, Pac Bell, SBC ballpark history, Nate Scherholtz and Hunter Pence.
Yeah.
Maybe the two best right fielders ever for the home team. So.
What about that Cruz guy that dropped the ball in the playoffs? Oh,
there you go. Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about. I was hypnotized, I think, and it cost me a lot of money to forget that. So, yeah.
Cool, but yeah, so that was a good trade, and then just to talk about some other people that were on this roster or who helped contribute.
Yeah.
Javier Lopez, one of the better. One of the better relievers, lefty relievers in the major leagues. Giants traded for in July 2010 for John Bauker and Joe Martinez.
Yep. John Bauker, another one of a long line of promising Giants youngsters at first base. Who are the guys? J.R. Phillips and John Bauker and. Another guy he's called Timey. Who am I forgetting? A big left-hander.
Oh, he had a twin with the Orioles.
Did he? Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name, though. There's so many of them. And I have to be honest. I don't know what the Pirates are thinking. I mean, I've thought that for a long time now.
Yeah.
Before we started the show, we talked about the Matt Morris trade, right? Where they dumped all that money.
I mean, we talk about money, right? It's, he was a free agent, so they wanted to just get something for him.
Right.
And then he ended up being like one of the best lefty relief specialists in the major leagues. Which here's the funny thing about that, we've talked about this before, maybe outside the podcast, is like, even to this day, even though, you know, people don't value relievers as much.
Yep.
Even though, you know, the baseball concepts or theories changed in the 80s with La Russa bringing, people still, like, a lot of managers still don't want to spend money on relievers.
Right.
And we found that just by the World Series,
Yeah.
relievers are the most important thing in a way. I mean, obviously having a horse starter who can come in on 2 days rest and pitch 5 shutout innings helps too. But again, that's relief, you know. And
it's good to, like, if you know you're the 7th inning guy, the 8th inning guy. And by the way, Bruce Bochy has a long and successful track record with that kind of setup, 7, 8, 9, 9th innings guys. And you know, it is something that it's a part of Brian Sabean's philosophy since day one. And, like, in that, you know, in the middle of the season, when they went after Javier Lopez, they made another great trade for a reliever from the Red Sox, Ramon Ramirez.
Oh, yeah.
In that same season. And we talked in the previous podcast about, you know, going after kind of a small name, Doug Henry, from the Astros for Scott Linebrink, speaking of Bochy and the Padres. And, you know, they just have always done well in picking up relief pitchers, whether through free talent that no one else wants. You know, Santiago Casilla was let go by the A's. You know, Guillermo Mota a few years ago before he got caught juicing a second time. And I think I'm going to make because this is something I've been thinking about for a while. I think one day it'll even be more specialized. We'll have, like, guys set to pitch the first 2 innings and the next 2, the first 3. And people don't want to believe it now, but who would have thought 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years, that you'd have a 6-inning game? No one really did. So the bottom line is to win.
It's like Little League.
There you go.
For 6 innings,
you can use the excuse, hey, I can't. How can I talk to my son after let all these guys play? Bottom line is to win. And people criticize Sabean for the draft. Yeah, he's drafted poorly, but they also had a bunch of rookies contribute to this run today. So,
I mean, you think about the draft, and we should probably have another podcast called MLB Draft History, MLB Pickup History of garbage players who end up being really good on your team history. But but no, I think you're right. I mean, I think after 3 World Series and 4 World Series appearances, I think you could say Sabean he's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, that's more than Billy Beane and some of the other kind of more talked about GMs combined in recent years. So.
And someone mentioned that he actually helped build that Yankees team with, like, he drafted.
He was a scout
Jeter,
back then.
He helped draft Jeter.
Mariano Rivera. He's all part of that. Even, like, you know, Robinson Cano and Soriano. We talked about Alfonso Soriano. And he was a big part of that.
Yeah, so let's just kind of finish up talking about the Giants, because I think we've done. We can go on for hours, by the way, guys. So hopefully there's some Giants fans or people who are interested in these things. But
we'll get to the Royals, guys.
Yeah. So Angel Pagan was another trade that the Giants did. And that was another really good trade. That was 2010. He helped them win the World Series in 2010. He helped them during the season when he played. But and then another guy that they got in a trade who helped them a little bit, he won 4 games for him this year, was George Contos from the Yankees. So
they're getting rings. So
that's right. So how about the Kansas City Royals? The guy that comes to mind is Big Game James Shields.
Yeah, big game, little game, no game. James Shields. In all fairness to James Shields, he actually did have a good Game 6. He did well, but I think if you look at his overall playoff stats, it's the antithesis of big game. They're actually very big mediocre games. So, but they got him and Wade Davis for Will Myers. That's Will with one L, I believe. Myers. And what's the second guy who did okay as a pitcher last season, right?
Jake Odorizzi.
Yeah, that guy.
Odorizzi, yeah.
I think, James Shields, if anything, well, he was, helped to kind of. I think when you make a move like that, and whether you're a fan base or just a team that hasn't won much, it's a statement. Like giving up that talent for okay, we're trying here.
Mm-hmm.
Like that year Zito was signed, they gave Gil Mesh 5 years, $55 million. And he retired a year earlier, so they didn't have to eat the 11 last. So people but my thing is, at least they tried.
Yeah.
So I think and then you have like a guy you're counting on at the front of your rotation, and no one knew about Wade Davis's. I mean, some people say the greatest relief performance ever, like statistically for the whole year. Didn't give up one home run, I don't think, in the regular season.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. He didn't, yeah.
And Will Myers won AL Rookie of the Year with the Rays, and then he fell off this season. He was injured, but he also wasn't doing well before that.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because Wade Davis. So it's so funny how this shows how hard it is to be a starter, how hard it is to get a great starter.
Yeah.
So I think that was a great trade for the Royals, and even last year, like. Will Myers won the World Series. He won the Rookie of the Year, and then they have a pretty good starter in Jake or Odorizzi. But Jake Shields solidified, like to your point, solidified that team. He actually came in. They have a #1 starter. He actually got some Cy Young votes last year. He had a really good year this year. Probably is going to get some. His ERA was really low, 3.15 last year, 3.
Free agent.
3.2 this year too.
Yeah.
So both years. Yeah. He did really well, and he's going to get a lot of money.
Yep.
So, I mean, that was a really great trade for both teams, probably.
Yeah.
And even, well, obviously for the Royals, they got to the World Series with both these guys, and they get to keep Wade Davis probably for another year.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's just a testament to them pulling the trigger. I mean, I think I was surprised when they traded him because I always viewed Royals as like cheap or they don't want to pick up. They'll just trade their talent last minute, but they obviously knew they had something. So
yeah, and who knows? Maybe Addison Russell will be the next kind of Will Myers as far as disappointing. And we keep talking about this, right? But if you make it to the World Series or you win the World Series, it's kind of like a victory. And James Shields, and even more so, I think Wade Davis were a part of them, coming through the playoffs and undefeated 8-0, right? 8-0 into the World Series and taking it to a Game 7 against a team that just has something. There's really something to say about that.
Yeah, and you think about it like, these GMs, they're doing all these other things, right? It's like, so, and even like in terms of like trades, and we get into this too ourselves. I know I do for myself personally. Like, I'll start to look at one intricacy, and I don't look at the whole thing.
Right.
Like, so they'll trade. Maybe you make a trade, and James Shields and for or whatever. Like, let's say for the Giants, Sabian made a trade that wasn't so good. But then he's done all this work. So if you're working and you have like 10 things that you do and one of them falls through and doesn't do really well, people will focus on it, including myself. So when you see that these Kansas City Royals did things right. They traded, they got really good trades. Maybe they did some other stuff like the Gil Mesh thing that you mentioned. But it's just kind of like really you have to give credit where credit's due. Or like this GM is really putting it out there to try and make sure that the team wins.
And I think you're right. I think it's easy to kind of people to remember that negative thing and not the 88 positive. Like Brian Sabian, we talked about it too. The Joe Nathan trade.
Yeah.
And I know some people locally bring up the Shea Hillenbrand trade for Jeremy Accardo. It's like, well, what about the J.T. Snow for Alan Watson, or the Kirk Reeder and Tim Scott for what's his name? Mark Leiter, you know, and Jeff Kent and Jose Vizcaíno and Julian Tavares and Joe Roy for Matt Williams.
Yeah.
And all the other ones, too, that we talked about in this podcast and previous podcasts and in private.
Yeah.
To me, all that, there's a lot more positive happening than the Joe Nathan trades.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and same thing with the Royals. I mean, I was really happy to see them in the World Series,
Yeah.
and I probably would have rooted for them if the Giants were not in the World Series. I definitely would have rooted for them.
It's funny, by the way, because in an earlier podcast, or our Fred McGriff one, I mentioned a childhood friend of mine who we talked about that trade when it happened, the Fred McGriff, Joe Carter, Blue Jays, Padres trade, and I mentioned that he was a contrarian. He was a Royals fan. I'm just being a Royals fan. He had Brett Saberhagen jersey and a Royals hat, 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And I thought about him a lot during this World Series. I just want to kind of call him up and laugh, but I'm not going to do that because that's not nice. But
I actually have a friend, and my roommate's from Kansas City, but he's grown up in San Francisco. And then I have another friend that I talk to quite a bit.
Yeah.
And she's actually rooting for the Royals. We were talking about him, so it was just kind of interesting. And we actually talked before Game 7.
Yeah.
And she was all like, I hope it's a close game because the Royals are really good at it. And I'm like, yeah, me too. I hope it's just fun. So it was just kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then the next trade is Jeremy Guthrie.
Yeah.
And that was a good trade.
Yeah. Once upon a time, the Giants had this guy named Jonathan Sanchez who just couldn't handle, close pitches being called balls and people booing at him. So they finally traded him to the Royals for Melky Cabrera. But then the Royals flipped him to the Rockies for Jeremy Guthrie. And wins are kind of overvalued by people that don't really look at this closely. But there are other numbers too. And he's been a solid, maybe number 3 pitcher, maybe.
I mean, he's pitched over 200 innings for them the last 2 years. He won 15 games last year, 13 this year. Yep. So, I mean, he was, more than worth what they gave up for him. Which Jonathan Sanchez is out of baseball, or he's not. I don't know what he's doing, but it's kind of sad that
he's watching his no-hitter videos in the basement. So I'm kidding.
It could have been a perfect game, but
there you go. Yeah, that's right. But, or Amy G's hug in the dugout at the end, which was criticized, but it worked out well for the Royals, right? And it was, I believe Jeremy Guthrie was about to be a free agent, like Jonathan Sanchez was. It was kind of a swap of kind of underperforming pitchers, and they were able to re-sign him, and it has paid off so far. I think it's paid off. I mean, he could kind of suck next year, and it's paid off.
Oh, yeah.
He may be a free agent. I don't remember.
I'm not sure, actually. I'm going to look it up, but...
By the way,
he's signed with the team for next year, next 2 years. A pretty decent bar, 9 and 10 million.
Not bad. Yeah, not bad in today's baseball.
Yeah.
And there is that kind of, we talked about it earlier about off air about the there is a Jonathan Sanchez, Hunter Strickland, Jeremy Guthrie tie, and that's that. The Pirates had wanted to pick up Jonathan Sanchez and to make room on the roster for him, the 40-man roster. They let go of Hunter Strickland, who sucked in the playoffs, but there's something there. But Jonathan Sanchez is like, he can't win, right?
Yeah.
On the field or in life. That's enough. That's not nice, but
yeah. So and then
we love Sanchi around here.
So by the way, I still can't get over the Amy G hug that you're talking about.
But, it's just it's very strange.
So the next trade that was really helpful on this World Series team, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, the main players were the Royals. So Zach Greinke was out of baseball for a little bit. He was dealing with clinical depression and anxiety, and he thought he just needs to retire. Turned his life around, came back as a reliever for the Royals and did well. And he said, I need to play with a winner. And they explored trades, and they had a great one with the Washington Nationals in place that he nixed because he was on their no trade list. But they ended up doing one with the Brewers that brought back two large contributors, shortstop Escobar and center fielder, right fielder Lorenzo Cain. And is it Jeffries, depending on how you pronounce it. I believe he's a pitcher. But, like, Lorenzo Cain hit over 300 this year in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
He will be a Gold Glove winner by next season.
Mm-hmm.
And he was easily their best player, I think, in the playoff run.
Yeah.
It seemed like he always got a hit, and he caught everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
So annoying.
Yeah. So, and yeah, Zach Greinke got traded again to the Angels and signed with the Dodgers, but he's gotten healthy and turned his life around. But that was a great trade for the Royals. And I think maybe I would say Lorenzo Cain, Wade Davis, of the guys we've talked about so far, those guys came in trades that weren't really talked about at the time on the Royals end.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, like, speaking of, like, catching everything, that was something that was really impressive about the World Series. It's like, Escobar is another guy, like, just a pleasure to watch him play defense. And he's a pretty good hitter, 285 hitter.
Yeah.
So it's like, and they have him for a while. Both Cain and Escobar, they have those guys for a while. So.
Yeah. In a few years, the Yankees will trade for Lorenzo Cain and they'll rebuild again.
Yeah.
But it's funny how having a World Series with the San Francisco Giants involved, and you have a Cain as a star, and it's not Matt Cain, it's Lorenzo Cain, and spelled the same way too. And
he was really good. Actually, anytime Cain came to the plate, even when he was playing, like, I was scared that, like, he was going to get a home run against Mad Bum. Or,
same thing.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be really, I mean, he's good.
I think, whenever he struck out, which was like 2 or 3 times in the playoffs, it was shocking to me. Mm-hmm. You knew he was always going to get hit. He was going to catch everything. It just felt that way.
Well, I'm actually looking at his stats right now. I mean, he was the MVP of the ALCS, and he batted .533.
Yep.
That's crazy. And he batted .308 against the Giants. It felt like he batted like 1,000 against the Giants.
Yeah. And, I think he may have won the MVP, World Series MVP, if the Royals had won, to be honest. In baseball, it doesn't really happen with a losing... I mean, Jeffrey Leonard won it when they lost the NLCS to the Cardinals in '87. That's unusual.
Yeah.
And it's happened in football, too, in the Super Bowl. A losing team had the Cowboys, I think, had the MVP of the Super Bowl only once, though. So... Bruce Hurst had won the MVP and had it taken away against the Mets. So, just a preference I think Major League Baseball has.
Yeah, I mean, I think winners should really get it.
Yeah.
But so that's the end of the World Series. Well, next week we're gonna try to come back and do a 2014 retrospective on trades, and we're really looking forward to it. There's a lot of work to do. But we're really looking forward. We're really excited, and we promise we won't talk about the Giants for 40 minutes. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you, Amir.
Scott.
Thank you, Amir.
A lot of fun. Thanks.
Yep. See you guys.